Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the LJL officially unofficial broadcast, bringing you coverage of the LJL 2021 Spring Split. Must one right over here, Initialize in the middle, Nymera over on the other side. Gentlemen, welcome to our first coverage of Week 3. Week 3's coverage of the first game. That's where I was going with this.
I
I was like,
wait a
first,
second.
I was like, wait a second, I've missed some words.
Yesterday was a fever dream. It never happened.
Well, some of those matches and some of our predictions would like it to be
oh
that way.
boy!
But,
Please don't.
but we're definitely gonna have to see how these first few games go because it's definitely gonna be some spicy one. This first game is gonna be V3 facing off against the Hawks. Following that will be the Hawks facing off against CGA. CGA running it back over against Rascal Jester, and to end us out will be V3 Esports picking it up again, facing off against Rascal Jester. But gentlemen, this first game is the one that we're most interested about at the very beginning. And that's V3 Esports facing off against the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming. Coming into this, obviously, V3 are the team that's X-1. They don't have a reason to keep losing. They're 3-1. They're looking strong. They're looking like potentially the only rival to Detonation Focus Me at the moment, unless a new purveyor of victory starts really rearing their head. Gentlemen, who's your favorite Nymera first?
I think it's pretty obvious that I would say V3. They've looked really clean coming into this split. They've looked like they're coordinated, have an understanding on the meta, wide champion pools, and the synergy which V3 had in 2020 with their different members has somehow re-established itself within this team, even though they've replaced their top laner, jungle, ADC. They've only kept their mid and support, but it doesn't matter apparently. They have been the linchpins for something special, so I think V3 probably use that to win against the Hawks, who have been struggling in some of that synergy regard.
And Initialize, over to you.
Yeah, I'm doubling down. I completely agree. We say this because V3 genuinely look very good, and they look good in a way that surprises us. Hollow, as a rookie AD carry, has come in and put up some fabulous numbers. He really has, especially for a rookie split, especially for this guy who's coming in as, been in Korean solo queue, been around some challenger scenes a little bit as far as I'm aware, but that's kind of it. He's slotted in and doing a bit of an archer here. I'm guessing part of that is Reiner's really good, and V3 are very good at playing around their AD carry, so that obviously helps. Either way, he's looked fantastic. And I think the other big surprise for me has been Cog, who has just come in and looked really good on like all manner of champions. Everything from Jace to Ivern in the top lane. This guy's got a crazy champion pool and has made V3's drafting phase so much more versatile.
Absolutely. I mean, coming into this, V3 are always going to be pegged as the favorites, but the Hawks, we had high expectations for this Hawks lineup. We're just why are we so not enthused by them anymore, gentlemen? Like this was a roster who has Apperman, Tussle, Dasher, Zenit, Corporal. Like these are names that we're either have high expectations of or have high hopes for, but 2 weeks in and are we already discounting them?
So, I think part of it is there has been a synergy issue in that basically they have not really been playing through their mid-jungle 2v2, which is kind of what the synergy is already existing. Instead, they've kind of been trying to play maybe through top jungle 2v2, but that synergy's not really been quite there, and there's been some serious disconnect. Number of top 2v2s haven't quite gone the way they wanted to. Or Tussle has kind of been in an odd no man's land where he's been going for things, and no one else has been there around to come and back him up, and that kind of lack of communication or synergy with the jungler has been really hurting them.
Yeah, Nymera, just any other thoughts on top of that, or more of the same? More of the same.
Well, obviously, Initialized is hitting on a lot of very crucial points there, but I don't think the Hawks' worries end at the laning phase early into the game when they do have a lot of their problems within lane. I mean, we looked at Corporal having a bit of a couple of awkward moments, even though Apperman has done some okay things in lane. It feels like they don't necessarily know how to balance the map around certain objectives, and which means that they end up turning up to Dragon fights and Herald fights in disadvantageous situations. I mean, particularly against DFM last week, they really got torn apart at the seams early into the game, where DFM, and of course they are very strong, but it just goes to show like how the Hawks might need to revisit how they're approaching their early objectives in terms of how they're using their priority to get to them.
Absolutely. I mean, last week we saw the Hawks fall to Sengoku Gaming. Sengoku are having their own problems, as we've already seen, as we are doing a blast from the past here. It's definitely showing that even the teams they are losing to or sometimes winning against, or the teams that are lower down on the tables are still beating the Hawks. So it seems like their Hawks have got definitely some form of problem. And let's actually talk about the most important part, as potentially Nymera said the best player is on V3. And let's talk about this jungle matchup, Nymera. We're going to go over to you first. Normally it would be Initialize first. I'm sorry, Initialize, but he brought this up on the podcast, so I have to. I feel obligated to go over Muujin.
And I mean,
Hustle. Like, what is that?
Just saying, I do play jungle as well. It's not like I'm a single role talent. And I am the higher rank.
Really? No, don't listen to him, guys. He only plays Ari, and that's it. That's all he can play. Look at that shelf.
ARAMs have trained me in the art of many champions. So, what's happening with this guy, Muujin? Muujin's just damn good. He knows how to shield his lanes better than anyone in the LJL right now. He turns up at the right time. He knows how to use his points of power. And it's one of those things where, say if you're in solo queue and you're playing, your heavy farming junglers, sometimes there's just that urge to just go farm some more and get yourself some more gold. But there's a way to balance that to the point where you're actually impacting the game, getting into lanes. And me farm. But what I'm saying is, Muujin gets to have it both ways, because he's so time efficient with everything he does, and always keeps up in farm, always has this ridiculous amount of CS to his hand, but then also is just in the right place at the right time. And I think that's been so important for the way V3 have been playing, and it was really important with how Boogie propped up the team last year. So it's great to see them reprise that kind of performance with a different player.
Initialize, what's your take on Muujin? As on the podcast, you were very complimentary to them, but just not as high on your expectations. You still had some love for Steel as the #1 jungler.
Oh, I mean, like, that's the conversation, though, at the minute, right? Is that there are, of the junglers in the LJL that have been really, really consistently performing. I mean, maybe the likes of Hatchemetcha, Hoglet to an extent, or even Cassin, right, with some of his crazy Rex high picks and stuff, have kind of put a name to them, saying, put a name out there saying, look, we're really good. But Steel has been consistently genius in the jungle, really smart, even when early lanes have been a bit rough for DFM. DFM have never fallen behind that far because Steel has been playing the map so well. But the other person who's kind of been doing that right alongside him has been Muujin. Of course, both of these teams are doing quite well at the minute, and that obviously helps you look good, especially in the jungle, where if you lose, you tend to lose quite hard, because jungle camps are one of the things that goes, and jungle control is one of the things that go when you start losing games.
Absolutely.
But even then, actually, this is a meta where playing through or around your jungler and how they manage to get their own farm and setups, even if they're on something like Udyr, is quite important, and Muujin has definitely been really up there. I mean, he has put some real work in on things like the Nidalee and the Lilia, in my mind. And even if he has dropped a bit of siesta, granted Udyr, who just power farms like a monstrosity, he has done a really good job of finding a way to cover his lanes, coming into these mid-game skirmishes, and then being a real threat in late-game team fights.
Okie dokie. So, watch everybody. Zenit. Well, not Zenit. I messed that whole thing up. Watch Muujin, the other new Korean player that came onto V3 Esports, but the one that's Flash Wolves heritage, so there's always that. Versus Tussle, the man that is trying to find his footing really back in the LJL after USG blew up and the Hawks began. It's really not been a great time for this player. But, gentlemen, this is a blast from the past, so I think it's about time that we get into that pick and ban phase. So, gentlemen, why don't you take us away?
Thank you so much, Lexi. And that leaves us with a game to cast here between myself and Nymera. We've got
incredible.
Hawks.
We're actually casting League of Legends. I didn't realize.
I know. Did you know? Yeah, this was going to be Rocket League. Come on, man. And then V3 Esports on the red side. Either way, Hawks have Apperman, Tussle, Dasher, Zenit, and Corporal rounding out their roster.
What a save. V3 have Cog, Muujin, Ace, Hollow, and Reiner.
Well, with that in mind, we've got a few bans we ought to touch on, namely Renekton and Jace have been taken off the board by the Hawks, whereas on the other side, V3 are aiming at what appears to be Tussle's champion pool, with Lilia and Olaf being removed.
So, Tussle has struggled. He's not really managed to, as we've said with Muujin, get into the game with a good enough lead, and then even on stuff like Lilia, where you can just power farm, you can just throw swell seeds down lanes, you can just revert that back to that playstyle. He's struggled in the grouped up fights, not really getting the best Q ults, not really having that poise to have the same impact as some of the other junglers, but it's still a comfort pick. So what are they left with? We've got stuff like Talia. Nidalee has been falling off just a tad, but that's still an option too. And both these top laners, of course, do love to play their Renekton. In fact, so much that even Apperman's team have banned away the Renekton.
Of course, that's 3 jungle bans, but anybody who's been listening around about some analysts saying, well, like, yeah, you've banned 3 junglers, but you still leave the 4th up. Literally gets first pick straight away. The Pantheon is locked in, likely going towards Tossle, but I say that it is still a flex pick.
That it is, and it, unfortunately for the Hawks, though, it gives over Kai'Sa, and Kai'Sa can just do anything in the current meta if they get ahead. So the options to play into Kai'Sa, normally stuff like Xayah, because Kai'Sa's not the lane-dominant champion. You can definitely get kills in that lane, but Samira, Rel is another combo which can get on top of the short-range AD carry. It's a short-range carry for yourself, but the all-in potential is pretty astonishing.
Pretty nuts. Yeah, you pull the Inferno trigger, and Rel goes in with a Magnet Storm, and that is not a pleasant place to be if you are one of the V3 members. That said, of course, there is Muujin there on the set who can showstopper people away. You can't Blade Well that, which is not a bad choice. And of course, they just lock in the Talia here as well, which is another one of those junglers. Never mind the 4th or 5th pick. There's your so many junglers that are worth picking at the moment, and I think Muujin will be pretty happy with the Stoneweaver in his hands.
Sure. I mean, jungle is at the point where it is being nerfed as a role in the next couple of patches because it's just too strong. Ever since Season 8, jungle has just been in a point of dominance. Not always, the out and out most powerful role in the game, but you think back to Tiad at Worlds and a couple of other performances throughout the years, and you think, all right, okay. Definitely something to be looked at if a lot of these junglers can pull off what they are doing, and the champion pool has very much supported that coming into season 2021 as we see these second bans coming through.
Yeah, mid lane focus from V3 right now. They're taking away the Zoe, which has been pretty high priority right now, honestly, interestingly, around various parts of the world. And Alistair from the Hawks obviously thinking to try and get a hold of potentially some of those support options. Of course, Reiner does play the set, but they're obviously thinking that Ace is potentially likely to pick this one up, which he has certainly done beforehand.
That he has. Dasher now having the Syndra removed, which is most of the more aggressive playmaking mid lane is in the control mode style of things, right? Because, and of course, Orianna's removed from the side of Hawks in that first rotation. And this is banned away from Ace. And Ace has never really typically been the Orianna player. It's only been this split where he's been pulling out, but he's been looking decent on it. Been impacting the team fights in a large enough way. Because before that, back in 2020, Ace played his first Orianna game. It was versus Detonation Focus Me in the final series, and it didn't go that well. But he's come back, and he's demanding some bans for that champion, so we'll have to see what he falls back to. A lot of the time, there has been something like the Jace, but there are a lot of champions left up right now.
Absolutely. And of course, there's those 3 big AP control mages off the table, right? Zoe, Syndra, Orianna are just gone now. I mean, there's Victor is the worst one that comes to mind as an option.
Hey,
and Reiner's Blitzcrank is locked in with an old meme attached to it as well. Don Blitzcrank was not where I was expecting my mind to go today, and yet here we are.
I watched that again yesterday. It was...
Why?
So there are many things I do without reason, and that might have been one of them. But the Hawks certainly have a reason to pick up the likes of Gragas and Akali. This is 11.2, so this is not... so this is slightly nerfed Akali, I believe, because it was nerfed last patch on the Q energy at higher ranks, and the Gragas locked in is just... It's tier pit, this is actually technically a flex between mid and top of the Pantheon, but it's going to be going up against the Scion either way.
So... Super tank Scion on the top side for Cog, and that's another unique pick, I think, for him this split. 5 champions in 5 games, I want to say at this point, but I'll have to go back and double check those stats. Or rather, 4 no, it is 5. I did count right. I saw the 3 on one side of the win column and had a bit of a mental brain fart there. But that leaves us with 2 comps. It's 2 AP solo laners plus Pantheon for the Hawks, which makes sense. A lot of aggression that Pantheon can pull out against some of these quite snowbally lanes. And on the other side, decent amount of pick and pretty good team fight, but if you're Kai'Sa and Talia stay alive for V3.
It is. We've seen some very scary, excuse me, very scary Scion performances out of the likes of Paz, in fact, over Sengoku Gaming. And Cog, well, he's pretty much played everything. He's been one of the most versatile top laners in the LJL, so he's kind of going back to tank duty for this game.
Okay, a little note from production, of course. Cog did in fact play Sion against Axes last week. So I'm disappointed, I'm wrong. But either way, that's still fair champion variety, even if he's finally doubled down on a champion. Much to my horror and embarrassment. But seeing these comps, my eyes inevitably turn to some of the early picks that could come out here. I mean, between a Blitzcrank and a Pantheon, this could get quite interesting early on.
I mean, I look at, the entire team of the Hawks, very low range. Samira's low range. Solo lane is low range. Jungle support, you guessed it, it's low range. And they're not going to be able to rely on shields. Blitzcrank ult cuts through that. If you dive into the Blitzcrank ult, I would advise you, dear viewer, to go watch the second matchup in spring between CGA and Rascal Jesters, because it was a game where there was some stupidly fed members on the side of CGA. Arya had a Silas, had a Medjay's at 25 stacks, goes into a Blitzcrank ult and just dies. Just dies. Sometimes in late game, Blitzcrank just deals with melee carries, and since the Hawks have so many melee carries into Set, Sion, Blitzcrank, it's very dangerous for the Hawks if they don't end up killing particularly the Kai'Sa on the intro of the fight.
That said, of course, if the Hawks, the Hawks have the tools to do just that, right? Like, Pantheon can come in with the ultimate, Gragas flash body slam, Akali heading straight forwards, the Samira as well, wild rushing while Rel crashes down. That's a lot of ways to just dive into a team and just start brawling with the AD carry, which I'm not sure Hollow will be enjoying all that much. But they have got to make up the distance before they can do that, I guess, is the point I'm trying to get towards.
And then I guess then another, well, not a spanner to throw in the works, but a pebble of some sort. There's also a Taliyah in the game. Taliyah is just very scary. And if you have, this is the other thing, if you want to dash on top of the Taliyah and they get the Unraveled Earth down, that's damage too. In fact, most of Taliyah's damage comes from that. So you kind of sit there as the Akali jumping in and realizing, much like the old LeBlanc Taliyah matchup of the first season when Taliyah was released, it just hurts.
Yeah. Stop hitting yourself has never been more apt than a dash champion versus Taliyah. Like, it sucks. And what counts as a dash as well? It's sort of like, aha, I managed to do this. That's still a dash. Oh, no, now I'm in trouble.
No. Basically, if it's not a blink and it's a movement ability, which you can't change the direction of after it's been cast, that's a dash. So that's Gragas E, Pantheon W, Akali, both parts for E and her R. It looks like we've...
Samira, yeah.
Just having a look what's happening on the VOD, of course, so you're going to look at our beautiful faces for a second or two as we see what's happening with delays coming into the game.
Okay, brief flourish, and here we are. Seen both comps. Nameplates off. Which comp are you favouring?
If you look at one team, like the Hawks, I think I love teams which do the same thing. Like, as their champions just, thematically work together.
It's a great identity. Yeah.
It doesn't work into V3's comp. It's horrifying. It's low range versus many champions which like getting in close and punishing low range champions. So for me, it has to be V3. Nameplates on or off.
Okay, so I think this has been a bit of a question we've had about the Hawks in some ways. It's like, they've made some comps that make sense in isolation over the last couple of weeks, but they've definitely had some issues in doing so in a way that hasn't put themselves in a hole versus the enemy's comp, and I'm worried they've done it again.
Yeah, certainly. It certainly sniffs of that. Looking through it, runes, nothing. Well, no, I guess one thing is that it's Conqueror for Ace on the set in the mid lane. This allows you to trade again a little bit better with the Akali, because sometimes you go for the phase rush, sometimes you'll go for the aftershock, right? Because this is the set mid. I don't know whether there's just going to be Aegis coming out of Ace. I'd imagine it is, but that's what we've been seeing more and more from the solo lane sets, because it is still a flex pick. And while I don't think that set is a top tier mid laner, because it allows you to flex around, I think it's important just to get preferential matchups across the board.
Okay, so Nymera has given his wisdom. We'll see whether it actually proves to be true. I'll hold on to that. It is a good wisdom. What might not be a good wisdom, though, is Corporal stepping forwards there and finding himself at the end of a rocket.
100% hook accuracy. What
No,
a
he
player
says
Reiner
actually,
is.
it's 50% hook accuracy because he threw one earlier on screen looking for someone in the
That's
bush,
significantly less good. That's like half, Sam.
Yeah, I know.
Wow,
It's
that's
not looking good. Yeah, I know. Pro player Reiner at a 50% accuracy. That's not what you want to see.
It's because the
Ace, that's good.
stun,
That's-
which
that was alright.
actually not a bad trade earlier. Because you look at Akali and sometimes you just say like, oh no, Akali's got infinite damage. It's got infinite damage. Just keeps going through Qs, keeps going through autos. Akali into melee matchups can be really annoying. But Ace managed to get the stun from the facebreaker, and the haymaker coming out. And this is one of my favorite things about playing mid lane.
Did it again.
It's just doing it again. It's doing really well for sure. Of course, there's the fleet footwork. There are two pots because of the Doran's ring start instead of going for the Doran shield or something like that, and only getting singular pot when you get that item. But when you're playing melee versus melee in mid lane, auto spacing and your positioning on the wave becomes so important because it particularly in this kind of matchup where you have the move speed to punish quite easily when someone does overstep just once or twice. It can be very dangerous in mid lane, and you can get the continual trades going against you if you just don't know how to position around your minions.
Okay, so that's another hook that went wild there. How could you, Reiner? I know you were checking a bush, so I'm not going to judge too much, but the memes require it. As Muujin kind of finished his jungle clear, came down to bot lane to help them shove that wave out nice and fast so they could get a better recall. Had been shoved in by Zen and Corporal relatively well. That kind of leaves us at a very even game state. It's 100 gold or so that separates these two squads, but that's basically non-existent. It's a slight CS leads in jungle and top that may well be evened up quite quickly.
For sure. Yeah, I know you were pointing out what Muujin was doing, but he went for like a half clear and then took his blue buff from the bottom side, and then I was sat there. He's like, oh, he went for a full clear. I'm like, well, why is he behind in CS? No, he still had some camps to get back to. What this has allowed Hollow and Reiner to do is to get a preferential reset on their own terms, because you can see that Zenith has gone for a cull on the bottom side. It allows Hollow to go for a similarly timed cull, get that stacked up in the early game, and means that they're not missing any CS to tower because they've managed to shove that in just before the cannon wave did spawn.
And there are few lanes that are as how do we put this? Wave dependent in some ways as the bot lane, where, you know, actually things like, do I get the right back timing to get the cull, can often be such a big deal in bot lane. We've seen less cull backs in recent weeks in patch days. I mean, at the end of last season, we were seeing it all the time, but it's kind of fallen a little off in priority.
It's why we often see very large discrepancies in bot lane in solo queue, right? Because if you don't know how to reset correctly, you get punished harder for bad resets, right? It's easier to have good and bad resets within mid lane because it's a shorter lane, as Tussle is caught between a Muujin and a hard place, or maybe just, I don't know, Rock and a Muujin, let's go with that. But
Ace in a similar place as well.
just a tad. But in mid lane, it's been much more of a studied fact about, in terms of backing just before the cannon wave spawns, and that allows you to you know, not lose the ranged minions to tower, and you probably pick. So even if the wave is pushed into tower, and Muujin again just helping out his lanes. I really like what Muujin's doing here. Again, he's playing the jungle in a way which not many LJL junglers tend to, in terms of how they're using their early presence on the map. He's done it as Nidalee, doing it again on the Slayer right now. And even though they're simple things, it can lead to incremental leads across the board. But yeah, so in mid lane, very much a studied fact. Most mid laners now take teleport too. That's another free reset. It means that often you're not punished as hard for taking bad trades like you can do in bot lane.
Yeah, it allows you to trade more with your face and just come back and be happy about it, which bot lane really doesn't want to do quite as much. And Corporal might be looking for a reset here himself, though does cancel that recall. And Muujin around this bottom side, even though he's going to be walking across a couple quite well-placed deep balls actually from the Hawks. He'll be spotted on his Gromp. Was half wondering whether they might consider going for a Drake start, but now he's on control ward vision, no less. That might be a little bit more risky.
It might be. I'm looking at, there are ultimates available from all solo laners, and one thing that the Hawks comp does, regardless of what point they are in the game, they just have pick potential. They have really good follow-up. They can pile onto a pick. You've got Grand Starfall, you've got Perfect Execution, Shuriken Flip. That mobility that we said gets them in close, a good spin wall coming out of Samira to block the hook. Of course, that's an interaction we'll have to look out for. But they have the ability, if someone is caught out from V3, to very much capitalize upon that, and that can be very important, because we've seen that Muujin was walking over vision. Talia will probably be the primary target for that, because they're more likely to be walking on their lonesome than Hollow, who would be the other preferential target to kill at the start of a fight.
Well, you heard it, and of course Muujin did go try to look for that lane gank, but the fact he kind of already been spotted out by his Grom from where he was pathing, like, he just didn't turn up in the river, right? No, okay, might be going for the lane gank and played relatively safe. I mean,
Well,
also
they had
credit to
they had
Zen,
that ward on both
absolutely.
side, right? Because
Yeah, absolutely.
Muujin
Which
did
is
end up going, yeah.
Yeah, which is exactly what I was saying. Yeah. And of course, that kind of prevented that lane gank from working out pretty well, and Muujin kind of wasted his time. Has at least got level 6 now, so Weaver's Wall's available for those very long-range ganks, and see whether that plays out. But of course, on the other side, Tussel's got himself a Grand Starfall, which means both of these junglers can turn up at a moment's notice. But in the mid lane, Dasher has to be a little afraid of the Facebreaker plus Seismic Shove, but
Well, yes, has the showstopper. Could have been a flash showstopper back into tower. Very dangerous for the Akali, because Muujin, of course, was just waiting in the wings.
Okay, well, Tussle currently on his top side, and it has been now 8 minutes. No blood as yet. Slight gold lead, honestly, to the Hawks right now from lane advantages. Dasher goes for some aggressive trades. Muujin still around here, looking to see whether something can be found. Might be a bit of a scuffle around this top river instead.
Well, Herald, of course, just spawned. 8 minutes 30. Tussle has the Iron Spike whip. And Muujin, once again, finding priority for his laners by just going to mid lane. And Reiner fishing for a hook. But Corporal has similarly roamed up to mid lane.
He has, but that means that V3 are starting to move into the river in force. Tussle did start up that Herald, but has backed away to his blue buff, not wanting to get
you can't
involved.
use Herald to kill your blue buff. You can't use that to increase your clear time. Do not try this at home. Professionals only.
Sorry, I think I possibly phrased that a little off. I think the idea was started Herald, then moved away to the blue buff when he realized V3 was coming into the river. Clearly, I didn't phrase that quite well, but there's a flash in from Corporal with the Magnastorm. Ace manages to escape with the Showstopper, though, but now Reiner is looking pretty low. Well timed hook. Your Aegis means nothing at this point, and now Muujin is here. What a hook from Reiner. It's a 1-for-1 in the end, but V3 managing to turn around what could have been a disaster there.
It could have been really bad. So Reiner, of course, sees the ult coming in, and now Cog's got his bite of the pie.
He's going to try and come in as well. He splits the team, and Apperman now backing away, and that will actually mean that V3 will take the happily leashed Herald, but here comes the big explosive cash, and they're jumping into the back of Ace, who goes down as well, so it'll be a 1 for Herald trade.
So overall, it's a 2-for-1 to the side of Hawks, but they lose the Herald, and it is pre-14 minutes. What's happening across the rest of the map while that's happening? Well, Hollow is, of course, not ended up farming bot lane, so it's not like V3 have picked up extra waves, or Hawks have picked up extra waves, and that's often something that we talk about with these Herald fights, because that's the kind of thing which sometimes goes a bit unnoticed. Magnastorm comes in the mid lane, and this is what we're talking about. The pylon potential is there from the side of the Hawks, but when you ult in as the Pantheon, very, very bleeding obvious where you're going to be landing. There's a spear there, there's a standard, which sticks out in the ground, and Ryder goes, I guess I'll hook that then. Exactly what happens, and the fight continues after those two have tread their lives under turret, because of course this is a fight in 2 acts, and Ace says, alright, okay, cool, I have flash, maybe I can get out, and he doesn't.
He does not, and that means that the Akali and the Samira now, well, not the Akali. The Akali's got 2 assists, but Samira has 2 kills, which is a bit of a terror. Reiner's using the Hex Flash, though, to maybe force a fight onto the Samira, but nothing to be seen there. Of course, Blade Well, as we saw, can kind of negate some of those rocket crap opportunities. I'm not calling it Spin Wall. I know the name. I'm calling it Blade Wall.
Yeah, Spin Wall. Cool.
No,
well.
Stop. Stop trying to make Spin Wall happen. It's not going to happen.
That's what you think. Look.
Well, Nightmare gets knocked down. I mean, he'll eat ground, but he'll get back up again. Spin Wall rather than Beyblade, but the point still stands.
Oh my gosh, that's a never go back and watch Beyblade. By the way, it's aged very
is it
poorly.
That bad? Oh man, I loved that show when I was a kid.
I went back and watched Yu-Gi-Oh! And I was like, okay, yeah, it's kind of fun. But I watched the first couple of episodes of Beyblade again. And I'm like, okay,
it's not good.
Okay, maybe I'll leave this one in the childhood nostalgia bank.
No, I've never gone back and watched Beyblade. It's been
Dragon Ball, similarly, very, very good actually. There are a couple of shows which age very well, and I do love my anime. I love that the LJL it just gives us the chance to reference that freely. Hooks just don't land in this lane, because like the Blitzcrank Q is on a pretty long cooldown. It's about I guess it is about half of the cooldown of the the Samira W. But as long as Zenit's timing that, if you hold your discipline on when the Q is coming out, and you don't just give over the ones which you think might hit as opposed to the ones which definitely miss or definitely hit, then you can definitely play around the cool line pretty well. Dash is going in. Wow.
Oh, Muujin misses the seismic shove. That means Tussle is going to come in with the grand star fall at Muujin. He's going to die to Tussle. Nicely played by the Hawks. Dasher avoids it, goes straight back in, and Tussle is more than willing to follow up.
The pylon potential. You've got you must construct additional pylons, including Grand Starfall and Perfect Execution. The range of the follow-up that the Hawks have, if they are going into these 2v2s, 1v2s, is really, really high. The Hawks capitalize on Muujin, trying once again to get priority in that mid lane and just throw some threaded volleys at the mid lane. It just works out very, very well for the mid jungle duo of the Hawks, even though Ace was here all this time. So what you can see is that the combo first misses from Muujin, and then Dash is like, well, okay, I guess I go in for the first amount of damage. Muujin flashes away, but it's not enough to cover all eventual exits, and then Tussle gets right on top of them.
In the mid lane, though, V3 do manage to pick up 4 plates on that mid lane turret, courtesy, of course, of the Herald use and some decent shoving earlier on. And that brings the gold lead back only to about 1,000 for the Hawks, but they do have a gold lead, which has been a little while since we've been able to say that for the Hawks, who's actually played this early game pretty well, honestly,
yeah, they're not out of sight by any means, and I'm looking over at V3 and I'm thinking, well, Sion has a mythic, that's the Frostfire Gauntlet coming in. You're going to have, actually, it's going to be... Wait, what builds out of the Half-Bound Axe and the Iron Spike Whip for Ace, actually? Because I didn't know that, because I thought that the Half-Bound Axe only built into Triforce. It might end up being Stridebreaker, yeah. That would make sense, actually.
I'll have to double check.
No, you're probably right. See, this is the problem. I only play stupidly aggressive champions, which means that I often just go for assassin items. I don't tend to build a lot of Triforce or anything like that, so I haven't really had much chance with the Stridebreaker, because I'm not a Naro Darius player.
It is indeed Stridebreaker. That is Iron Spike Whip plus Half-Bound.
You would have thought after like a couple of months I would have this down by now, but believe it or not, there are a lot of items in the game, and it's really hard to remember the build path for everything.
It's okay, buddy. I've got you. What I do want to call out, though, is
they changed everything about the game, Sam.
Look, I'm trying... Shh, be quiet. I'm a jungler, and I'm about to have everything about my role nerfed. I'm going to find a final hook. Actually, the Blade Well was late there from Zenit, but he does manage to wild rush his way to safety, even if the Ignite was burned. And that's at least a half the HP bar now of this Samira down. There's still a minute until Dragon. 40-odd seconds till Herald, so probably chance to reset if they so want, but it's possibly not what the timing they were looking for.
I think it ended up blocking the Kaiser Q. So if the Ignite came through and the Kaiser Q came through, probably a dangerous. Dead Zenit, because you've got the ult to follow up from Hollow. This is really a dangerous thing. If you blitzcrack someone from that kind of distance, Hollow has a really long range to just chase people down. It's the same kind of thing with Aurelia in mid lane, Akali as a champion. If you have the distance to run someone down a lane, you just tend... The longer the distance, the more threat, right? Because they're always going to catch up to you because of that ult, because of the E movement speed and stuff like that. If you end up landing that Q, you don't tend to run away quick enough to escape that kind of trade.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I've also got a call out, of course, as well. I've been trying to do this for the last couple of minutes, but we've had some people starting to do things like Blitzcrank.
It is Stridebreaker, damn.
Very rude. There we go. But I wanted to call out the other side. That's the Kali who's not gone towards Riftmaker, but gone towards the Rocket Belt. Which is an interesting choice. I wanted to hear your thoughts on it, Nightmare.
So, Riftmaker gives you the Omnivamp. That's nice. But it's an extended trade pattern item. What this signals to me is that you want the magic pen, and Zenit wants to get the heck out of here.
There is a showstopper, but the flash will get him to safety, but he has to burn the heal as well. Ace uses his summoner to make Zenit's life real difficult in the mid lane.
So, okay, what are we talking about? We're talking about the Protobelt Akali. So, first off, it gives you movement speed after you activate it to get move speed towards enemy champions. That, combined with Fleet Footwork, combined with your passive activation, move speed 2, means that you get to cycle through your Qs really, really well. So, the functionality of Protobelt actually gives you a lot to play with as the Akali. Gives you magic penetration. It doesn't give you a chance to get out of a Pantheon ult, though, who's going right into the middle of things. That's dangerous.
That is very dangerous, and he finds himself hooked up and destroyed by the 3 members of V3. Corporal wasn't quite there at the same time as Tussle was going in, and that looks like a little bit of disconnect to me.
It does, because if you go in with a Magnet Storm, with a Crash Down, maybe you buy enough time for Tussle to get into the thick of things and Zenit start stacking the style passive. It's another free kill. Reiner sees the Pantheon flag in for the second time this game, goes, well, I'm having that. Lands the hook, lands the CC. Mugen, of course, gets the combo too, and Tussle having a bit of a nightmare when the rest of his team's doing pretty well here.
Yeah, I mean, we've had 1 or 2 good ganks. That counter gank in mid was really nice, but 2 of those Grand Sturfalls have been very aggressive, and I understand why he's going for them. I really do, but, like, needs to be a little bit better coordinated with the rest of the team, perhaps, and I'm not quite sure who to put the blame on for that one.
It's difficult, right? Because we don't get comms. It's very easy to just look at that and go, okay, Tussle pressed the alt button. He's the one who pressed the button. It's his fault. But there's a lot of communication which goes into that. And this is one of the difficult things about playing these pylon comps. You gotta pylon at the right time, or you get punished by this huge amount of melee punishment from, of course, well, the combo we saw there from Mugen and from Reiner.
And that actually gives V3 the gold lead here, and it's given them the first turret as well, which is just a real frustration for the Hawks, who'd picked up a second Herald and had kind of traded second Drake for that priority on turrets.
They have done. So I guess we're looking at first item completions now. We already talked about the Protobal from Akali, and yes, just quickly capping that off. It gives you Magic Pen as a mythic stat as opposed to Riftmaker's. I believe it gives you Percent Pen, which is just better in a lot of ways against the squishy champions. It just signals who he wants to be assassinating in this game.
Okay, Aegis comes out from Tussle and does not get shoved in, which is a great relief for him, I am sure. But that leaves us with a dragon that's not spawning, but a herald that is. Specifically in mid lane to try and shove down this turret for the Hawks to trade back here. But V3 are here to try and defend. Not likely to be able to stop it, though, and there it goes in. Still a little bit off, they can't quite finish it, and here comes the unstoppable onslaught. Shorts out a little, and they won't get into mid lane.
I like how excited I got there, and it's just actually.
I went to rise up with you, and I just saw it coming down. I was like, oh, okay.
The train will be terminating at this destination. Please get out. It's like when you have that unexpected destination change on a tube, and you're sat there and like, okay, well, do I need to like sit here at the platform and wait for the next ultimate, or I mean, I don't wait for my ultimate at tube stations, but you get the idea.
Hollow might need to. Good lord.
Hollow might certainly need to.
Very aggressively there.
As there's a big collapse of members from the Hawks onto this mid lane turret, and with that turret going down, the Hawks will even up what was a momentary goal lead for V3, and Reiner takes a bit of damage as he trespasses into the Hawks push into the mid lane
Double
turret.
TP. They're coming straight into the mid lane here, but there's a massive seismic shove at the back end of this. So both Mugen and Hollow desperately low. Dasher gets one, but it's already traded back onto the Pantheon. I'll take that trade for now then. Flash in from Appleman to get another. The cask not quite enough to finish up Reiner, and the showstopper keeps Dasher away from the blitz. Double is there, and Zenit's running rampant in the back end. Haymaker finishes off for Carly, but now we've got to see a Hex flash over the wall from Corporal to get himself out of danger, and that is a 3-for-2 in trade of the Hawks, who win that fight. Trying to get out of danger of this turret, though. Magnet Storm is finally
How did
used
Zenit get
at the
aggro?
back end of this one, but Zenit goes down to Ace, and the re-engage was so ill-advised for the Hawks. They'd won that fight. You just needed to stop.
Well, Affaman got caught on the turret by Ace's facebreaker. He takes so much damage that Affaman was just going to go down. I think actually somehow picked up aggro on the back end of that. And then speaking of aggro again, Zenit has a real nightmare of that, which he might have ended up getting a second ultimate even in that fight. Speaking of the first one, well, it leads in from the start of this play where Reiner lands a hook. Corporal immediately counter-engages on the Rel. That was really important. It allows Dash to go in and not really care about the aggro from the rest of the teammates. And the top lane tanks do some really good work in this fight in particular. Affaman gets right over the place, has the chem tank, of course. And Zenit, because of all the space bought for them by Affaman from Corporal, just gets to do so much extra work. I want to see what happens with the aggro here. I think that's just a mistiming. I think Zenit gets the first Q trying to stack up that passive. If Zenit doesn't get aggro, but it's got to stop talking. There's another fight.
It ain't done. Corporal's going crashing down. The health bar follows. Hollow gets a kill at the start of this fight, but now Colcock in the backside finds a fantastic decimating smash, but now Zenit's going in and gets one back. He's running rampant at the backside, but he's interrupted. Colcock shuts that one down, but now look at Dasher trying to dance his way out of danger, but can't quite do it. And V3 come out tops in another team fight. Hawks Hawks get engaged on. We'll have to see how that one works out. But now Ace gets a triple kill, and he's at 7-1 on 3 on this mid lane set.
Not 2 minutes have passed since we talked about the mid lane. Outer turret has fallen, evening up the gold lead for the Hawks. And now it has come to a 3,500 gold lead to V3. They pop out to a huge advantage, and they're taking a Baron off the back of a second fight going their way, putting the Hawks to the sword in this mid game.
Oh, welcome to the Blood Bowl. We'll see this replay.
Okay, we did actually see
what
the
happened.
numbers. So, I mean, looking at the tools available, Cog still has ult. Dasher just can't really disengage effectively. But then you look at Rhino, the hook misses. Blitzcrank without ult is kind of in a bit of an awkward spot. The Weaver's Wall pins everyone in. I think as soon as the Weaver's Wall comes in, the fight just cannot be disengaged from the Hawks. They just want to go in, but they're happy to take that fight. You can see the damage they have. That's a huge knock-up, stopping Apperman getting the belly bot, because that extra amount of damage coming in might have sealed things. I also think that Zenit going in, trying to get the reset, well, it does get the reset, and then trying to kill off Cog is just plain a mistake. It's just too tanky, and it's another fight from the replay.
It's not done. Magnus Storm is down. Dasher is dead as Cog comes charging through. And who said it was all about the Hawks diving? Because V3 are doing them for them. They're going to win this one very cleanly. And I think that might be all she wrote in this game. Because from a dead even game, it's now 16 kills to 8. And a massive gold lead. Apperman's going to cut the wave.
But there's a wave already. They're tanking the tower. They have a Scion.
Oh, Apperman, you need to get out of there. He cannot be there. Maybe the Nexus Towers will kill enough of it, but with the Scion, you're absolutely right. He can tank these turrets for days at this point. He's got himself 2 items, and they're going to try and end it here even. It's still about 5 seconds on Dasher. Corporal has respawned. V3 now in a 2v5. Going to try and extricate themselves from the base. Looks like they might be able to do so. It's a decent explosive cast, but little more than buying time right now. Ryan now being slowed down. Dasher is up, stepping forwards with the shuriken flip. Rocket belt, they'll get 1 back in trade. Dasher finds his 3rd kill of the game. That's a bit of a paltry silver lining, though, in comparison to your base falling to pieces.
And once again, checking in on the gold lead, it's no longer 3.5k, it's going up more towards 7.5. V3 double their gold lead with the Baron power play with a 4.12 gold haul from killing that objective. Now the Hawks have lost themselves a mid inhibitor, and they have to play this game from behind. Suddenly, you've got an item advantage on Hollow's Kaiser, who has a Hurricane on top of the Kraken Slayer Collector 2-item combo, whereas Zenit is painfully stuck at those 2 items. Dasher, while they have a strong spike at the Void Staff, has to fight off against the Sterak's coming in from Ace, who already had the Deadmans. All of these members of V3 have themselves the newest, the newest of things they could have bought from the store, and they're feeling very, very happy with their fashion choices.
Very strong, and you can see that gold lead is so even. There was a bit of a lead for the Hawks for the longest time, but then V3 find 3 team fights back to back to back to really put the game in their
Also,
hands.
worth noting, Cog's not actually died on the Scion yet, and given how the game's going, don't think he will.
Yeah, no, that's definitely proving difficult. Zenit's kind of found his engages and ultimate stunted pretty much every team fight because Cog just bodies him with an ultimate or a decimating strike.
Yeah, no, I think the Scion play has been immaculate. Honestly, very much like what V3 have achieved with their top lane pick. And we're left with mid lane pushing in de facto for V3 because of the super minions, Scion pushing in the top side because, yes, they're unkillable. We saw what happened when Dasher tried to walk up to them in the mid lane, just didn't really do that much. And that's one of the problems with not going the Rift Make. You lose the ability to kill tanks with your extended Q trade combos. And of course, you're not running Conqueror. Conqueror is the other rune you can go on Akali, and you can go that versus tank matchups. But Fleet Footwork has become the prevalent rune for the Akali over time. Just means that you do lack some of the ability to kill tanks.
Yeah, here comes Ace behind this. They're looking for a bit of a fight. The tussle being there does ward him off, though, for now. And the tussle. Looking for a tussle in top lane, in fact. That's a beautiful name for looking for puns, it has to be said. All the other side, though, like Ace right now, 8-1 and 4 on this set, has been another terror in these team fights. He's interrupted so many people. The face breakers, the showstoppers have really put people in difficult situations. And even when he went low in the last fight, they just couldn't finish him off.
No, and now the Hawks. This game is, we've said it a couple of times over the last couple of days, it's a formality, right? What do the Hawks do? The only way they get into this game is getting a huge series of picks, and if you get that onto Talia, it's really difficult because there's a Zhonya's. If you get it onto the Hollow, they have tier 2 ult, they have heal, they have a stopwatch too. Again, just really difficult to finish off the targets. You might want to, well, that might win you the fight, but even at this point, the tanks are so strong from V3, I'm not even sure killing one of those carries whilst the tanks are alive is enough to win you a fight, because the tank frontline can probably do ample work to reset the fight as long as they're within range of their carries.
And honestly, Stride Breaker plus Deadman's plus Sterex is not exactly low damage for Set. Granted, he's not exactly an AD carry worth the threat, but that's a far cry from, like, full tank Set. Like, he's got a fair amount of damage in that kit right there.
He does. I mean, Sterex gives you some AD. And
Sure.
the thing is that because your grit, it does scale off your HP. The more HP you've got, the more damage you can potentially do with your Haymaker. So yeah, I mean, even building tank gives you some ability to do damage within team fights. And heck, they did get a triple kill not too long ago.
And there we go, Ace on this side lane, having a pretty fabulous game himself. And
Ace gets a bit of damage, was immediately healed up. Yes, nice.
Yes, there we go. Rhino also haunting these blue side walls and corridors, looking to see whether he can catch somebody out. But it really is just Hawks trying desperately to clear waves and find a way to get some vision control down, because at the minute they're walking into all this pick from Talia and Blitzcrank, and then you got a Set and a Scion who'd love to try and get something as well. Look over that wall.
Kog just doesn't
looking for the
care.
flank. Kog going in, and Rhino finds the hook. That's one down already. Zenit has his ultimate interrupted. He's got a blade well, but it does nothing versus Set. Akali gets one. That is the Kai'Sa dead. Gonna try and carry out the back end of it. Finds a second some way somehow, but does get interrupted by the decimating smash and will finally fall. It's just Tussle alone against the world, and V3 with 3 members alive will try to shove into end.
Dasher tries and doesn't succeed. It's been the story of Dasher on so many rosters. It happened last year, happens in this game in a bit of a microcosm, and it will be at the end of this game as V3 move to 4-1.
They will. The Nexus, only thing standing between them and victory. Corporal respawns, but I think it's going to be too little too late. There's no way they're killing Kog in time.
Funny you mention that. Most things that stand between teams and victory is the Nexus. It's crazy.
It's a bit of a surprise. Who knew that Nexus was so important to victory? But V3 could tell us all about it if we were listening to their interview right now, and they are the victors in this game, though it was significantly more close thought than necessarily we thought coming into it. Good early game from the Hawks, just wasn't quite enough, Nightmare.
No, it wasn't. I like the idea from the Hawks' comp, but they ended up running into such a difficulty in composition from V3, who just ended up having a lot of answers to them.
Well, a lot of mid-game team fights, and V3 come away with a victory. But to break it down, we'll be back with an analyst desk in just a minute or two.
Break it down.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Death's Must One Initialized Nightmare. Gentlemen, you just casted over V3 Esports, having a long game where they fell behind in the early game and then fight. 10k gold lead, win game? Like, whoa, that was definitely a roller coaster of where it looked like in that early game. There was definitely a good chance, Initialized, that the Hawks were actually going to find a way to actually run away with this game. They came out to like about 1.5k gold lead at one point.
Yeah, I mean, the Hawks had a pile-in comp and managed to get a few pile-ins. There was a really nice little mid-lane play in particular where Dasher avoids the seismic shove with the Shuriken flip and then goes straight back on to the Talia. In comes Tussle, and they find a nice little fight there. And they come up to about a 1,500 gold lead. Problem is they can never really expand it from there. And, you know, the Hawks and then V3 with some nice uses of like the Herald and stuff to get the mid lane turret and most of the plate to keep themselves nice and even in the gold, and then hit those mid-game team fights and things start looking significantly dicier for the Hawks.
Well, part of that is because of how badly turret aggro works, isn't it, Nightmare? And that was an unfortunate fight for the Hawks. If things go a little bit differently, I can see that fight going very differently and potentially the game going very differently for the Hawks.
I very much agree with that. That fight under mid lane in a turret, I was sat there thinking, what the heck? This is a Samira that gets to ult twice in a fight. Well, it would have been if Zenit actually managed to not get aggro. So it's like, obviously it was like a 3-for-2, and there were 3 members left of the Hawks, and then Afferman gets caught, and then of course Zenit takes aggro. It's a series of misplays which lead to the Hawks honestly losing a 1 fight, and that's really heartbreaking for them because team fighting into V3's team was difficult. It's not something which I'd really give to V3's comp in a 5v5, talked about it right from the draft, right? But they managed to find some really good team fights throughout that game, but that one just felt so crushing at the end of it.
Yeah, and losing all 5 members, getting that ace while you gentlemen were talking about that fight and covering and giving your insight and thoughts around it, another team fight happened where Talia Wall basically blocked off the whole of the Hawks' escape route, and it was a fight or flight Initialize.
Yeah, I mean, it happened multiple times. We come out of a replay, into a fight, out of a replay, into a fight.
3 times in a row.
And every single one of those was V3 running over the back end of the fight. Yeah, Dasher honestly managing to pull out scraps, like getting hollow a couple times in those fights, was nice, don't get me wrong. But Set got a triple kill in that first fight you were talking about in the mid lane with the Talia Wall coming in because they couldn't finish him off. Sion, rather, also got a 3-man decimating strike from behind everything to knock everyone up and prevent too much follow-up. And the Set and the Sion were making particularly Zenit's life an absolute nightmare in these fights because you could never free fire, could never pull off the ultimate because every time he was in melee range to be starting to pull off those spin to win techniques, he was just getting interrupted.
But even then, we saw 2 or 3 really key interactions / misplays from the side of the Hawks, because there was an interaction where it was Afferman getting their belly slam interrupted by the decimating smash in that 3-man decimating smash from Kokog, and then Zenit gets the first kill, even though that belly slam doesn't connect. And then flashes over and tries to get a reset and get the extra damage onto the Sion, who just bops them because they haven't used their ultimate yet, just melee range ultimates, and ends that poor Samira. So even then, it was a series of unfortunate events within a couple of team fights in a row for the Hawks. But for them to be in a position where they could even win those 5v5s was pretty impressive. It's heartbreaking that they then lost them.
It is heartbreaking. I want to kind of end us on a weird note because we've talked about how the team fights, but as we mentioned on broadcast, or rather you gentlemen mentioned on broadcast, after those first few team fights very much went the way of the V3 and not in the way of the Hawks, the game became a formality. They just had to close it out and actually just finish off and get the objectives, which V3 did in very clean fashion. I actually want to reverse us and talk a little bit about this draft. As we saw the Blitzcrank get locked in, and then for the side of the Hawks, we see them then decide, okay, what we actually want to do is indent onto that Akali. And was that with the Gragas as well? And then the Sion pick at the end for Cog. Let's talk about this Sion, because you mentioned it on broadcast. The Sion pick is, well, we've seen more than one Sion now. And is Sion actually going to be something we're going to be seeing more meta? Is it more V3 won the pick and ban phase and it was just always going to be difficult for the Hawks? Let's go to Nymera first for your take.
Multiple ways you can view this. It's like, well, okay, which of these champions can play in which situations? I think that the Hawks have the ability to dive side lanes and play the map with their very long range follow-up across different members. They didn't really get a chance to do that because they were looking for picks in the mid lane, which then the Sion would just ult into. And the Sion, yeah, I think we are going to see more of them, because if Sion ever gets ahead, very, very hard to deal with, even when you do have like high DPS characters like Akali. And Akali is pretty okay at killing tanks. Even when you go Pro to Belt, does okay. Went for the Void Staff second. I do think that V3 have shown once again, though, that they're very happy to just pivot on certain picks, have that set go pretty much anywhere on the board, and have an answer to most situations. That's why we think V3 are the second place team in this league. Not only are they just good on the Rift, they're very cerebral about how they approach even getting their champions to go onto that Rift.
Yeah, absolutely. And very quickly, last little point I want to give over to Initialize. In the interview that Ace had, they talk about the Taliyah set combo. Obviously, this is the idea that you can have the set, stun, and then Taliyah knock back and do huge sums of damage. We didn't actually get to see that in this game, but we did actually get to see a lot of Taliyah. Are you excited to see more of Taliyah in this metagame, or are you a little bit done with the rock thrower?
I think Taliyah is pretty good at the minute. I'm always excited to see something like a Taliyah. I think she's a bit quite interesting. I think also like the ultimate allowing her to turn up. It allows for another play pattern in the jungle. And as long as she is able to farm well enough to be safe, she'll always be useful, because Seismic Shove is just such a good tool to set up with if you've got CC in your lanes. It's a bit like Nidalee plus Renekton. It's like one of those combos you go, yeah, that's pretty dangerous and you need to be aware of it. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to see a little bit more, especially if it's being played well.
Okie dokie. Well, with that all said, gentlemen, let's go over to a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to be covering the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming attempting to find their first win of the day, facing off against Chris Gaming Act. Don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen.